Fighting out of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, Damien Beatdown Brown.
What's up, folks? Welcome to the Wireless Podcast. I'm your host, Damien Brown, UFC and Army veteran. I created the Wireless Podcast to cover all things sport, lifestyle, physical and mental health. It's not about me, it's about the listeners. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at Beatdown155 or subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Wireless Podcast, and hopefully we can produce some wicked content for you in the near future.
What's up, folks? We're here with the Fight Dietitian himself, Jordan Sullivan. How you going, man?
Yo, thanks for having me, Beatdown. What an intro that is, eh?
I'll just do my best on the mic, man. I've been listening to Bruce for long enough.
Yeah.
So what's happening, man?
And not a lot, just keeping busy through these crazy times, eh? Such as yourself, eh? Like you're just adapting and making it work. So,
man, it's all we can really do, you know. Like it's pretty well for our generation. It's unheard of to basically be locked down. You know, it's happened to different generations before, but definitely for us, I mean, us in particular, you're always traveling. I'm always training. I'm always coaching. We always got so many things going on. We wish we had time. Now we've got too much time. We wish we had things going on. So,
man, I know it's not the worst thing, to be honest. I kind of like it. Like I said, like I travel a lot too. I kind of came off a real busy 3-4 month spell, and I was going to give myself 4 weeks off anyway. So it kind of worked out well, but after about 8 weeks into it, you're kind of like, okay, well, ready to get back to it.
You get sick of that spin bike, eh?
Yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't know, it's at the Fight Dietitian, right?
Yeah,
on Instagram.
Fight Dietitian, yeah.
Check out his Instagram. He's always on the spin bike.
Man, I can't stand that thing. It's going off. That's going off the balcony. The second lockdown is done.
Basically, you know, we just got you on today. There's lots of things we can talk about as far as nutrition and that goes. But I would say I've been through most of it except for kidney failure and ended up in hospital after a weight cut. I've been in hospital, but not from that. So I think we could just kick it off by talking about maybe some of the misconceptions with cutting weight. So, I mean, as a coach now and not just an athlete, it's for me it's pretty important to monitor my athletes. And what I find is if you've never experienced it, never used a dietitian, nutritionist, or anyone of that professional level, then you probably haven't had your own exposure to it either. But I find a lot of coaches probably go with the old, just cut your carbs out, which is what I did for, you know, the better part of the, you know, first half of my career or whatever. You just cut your carbs out for 8 weeks and you're hungry and tired and you just grind and it is what it is. But it's not what it is.
Yeah, that's the thing though, man. And you can't really blame these guys for doing that because nutrition as a science is confusing. Everywhere you look, there's contradicting statements. 1 week we're saying fats are good. The next week we're saying fats aren't good. 1 week we're saying low carb. The next week we're saying high carb. I think that's a real runoff, the low carb thing of the Atkins diet and things like that, where a lot of coaches went through that generation where it's okay, low carb means lose weight. And you absolutely do lose weight when you lose carbs, but there's a couple reasons why that happens. I think the first and foremost, you need to clarify, if you want to lose weight, time and time again, it showed, study after study, no matter what, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Now, this creates this problem, the first real big problem of nutrition, which is okay, well, what's a calorie deficit? Everyone uses this model where it's calories in versus calories out. And that seems really simple. Your calories coming in, you burn more than what comes in with calories coming out. Easy, right?
Yep.
But not really. Measuring calories in and calories out is actually one of the toughest and hardest things to do in nutrition science. So if you think about what a calorie is, we define a calorie as the amount of water that 1 gram of food burns. So how much energy and heat. Say if you take 1 gram of carbohydrate, how much does that to heat up, the energy needed to heat up 1 kilogram of water? And there's actually 2 types of calories. There's a large calorie and a small calorie. And to make straight off the bat, this is confusing because we use, say, a large calorie in food. We'll describe food as a bar that is, say, 120 calories, when in reality, it's 120,000 calories. Like in practice, that doesn't really make a lot of difference, but I always like to say that because it sets this precedent that it's confusing from the get-go. So calories in, one, like defining a calorie, we can do it, but we get that mixed up straight away. Figuring out how many calories is, say, in your coffee, you're going off like, you know, how much that label says. How accurate is that label? Like it's pretty accepted that those labels are off by 5 to 10%. And if someone's like counting calories strictly, if that adds up, right? So it's
I mean, like to count calories off a label to start with, that food's never made individually.
Exactly.
It's made in a pot.
It's batch
You know what
tested,
I mean?
and
Like
that's
it's like, yeah, like you said, it's batch tested. So like they put it in like 30 containers and it's like, this is about what it should be.
Yeah, and you think how the average person tracks their calories, it's through like MyFitnessPal, Calorie King, and they're kind of using foods that are similar to the foods they're eating.
Yeah.
So one, you don't know how much calories you're really getting in. Then you get into the debate where it's like calories out. So it starts with like, okay, we need to be in a deficit to lose weight, but like a deficit from what? And it's like, okay, we know that your body needs to burn a certain amount of calories just for you to function. For you to be beat down brown over a 24-hour period, you need a set amount of calories. You can go into a lab, like I can take you to a lab, you can breathe into a machine, and that machine will assess the gas that comes in and out, and through some equations will tell me in that 20-minute period, it can use that to give us a good estimate of what your body uses in 24 hours. So we can get that information. Yeah. But in saying that, it's like, how does that change though between every day? That's just you sitting down at rest. We know that beat down brown in a 24-hour period isn't just laying back in a chair, breathing in a tube. You're getting up, you're running the gym, you're training yourself. If I get that number, and let's say theoretically I get that number right now, and then I sit down, stand up out of my chair 20 times, that number changes.
Yep.
So then we've got this problem that we've got this fluctuating number that we're trying to get a deficit from.
Yep.
So it's not fixed. And so what we need to take in consideration is like, okay, we've got that number that's fluctuating. You're burning energy through your training, which only really contributes like 5-10% of that total, like 10 to 15 if you're a pro athlete. And then like all the other little things you're doing, getting up, moving around, like we call that your NEAT, your extra energy. And then like you need energy to digest food. So like, as you can appreciate, like that calories in, calories out is complicated just getting those numbers. And then you layer on top of that the metabolism of the human body. You put food in, you get a hormonal response, you release insulin. Insulin has a storage effect throughout the body. There's all these like anabolic hormones, catabolic hormones, they all interact. We know the way that you eat food interacts with those hormones, those pathways can upregulate, downregulate. So nutrition as a science, like what I'm getting at, is very confusing and it's very hard. So it's like when people say, hey, I just want to cut carbs and lose weight, it's like, I can understand how they get to that conclusion because it's simple and people want simple.
Well, I mean, basically because that's why you got a job, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why my job's to fight and not decide what I eat. But like, how come, like, and it's like literally decades, how come for decades it worked?
Yeah, so like when you talk about cutting carbs, like I said, if you want to lose weight, you got to be in a calorie deficit. So you got to think about if someone's cutting carbs, what are they doing? They're dieting as a whole, right? A lot of carby foods like your breads, your rice, your pasta, you're probably eating a lot of that. So when you're cutting those carbs, you're cutting out a lot of calories. So if you're losing weight, you're probably in a deficit as it is.
Yep.
This is why keto gets a lot of like traction as well, because you lose a lot of weight initially because you reduce what is called like your glycogen. So we store carbohydrates in our muscles and in our liver. Like it makes sense. Like when we break down carbohydrate, they break down into these things called like monosaccharides, which is like little single sugars. It's like the building blocks, like the bricks of this house, like the building blocks for carbohydrates. Our body needs them in those single units. And then if we don't need them, our body can store them away. And they store it as this thing called glycogen, where it's just all these single units put together. And that's good for our body. Say all of a sudden someone jumps in here in this room and we need to like, run away or do whatever. We need that quick, fast energy.
Yeah.
So your body naturally has that stored carbohydrate. When you're not eating carbohydrate, your body goes, oh, I've got the reserves in the cupboard. Let's take that out and we'll burn it.
Yep.
And the thing about that glycogen is that it's osmotically active, so it'll hold water.
Okay.
So you hold about 2.7 grams of water for every 1 gram of that glycogen you have.
Yep.
So all of a sudden you've cut that glycogen. Let's say for argument's sake, you've cut 400 grams. That's how much your body can hold. It could be way more. So let's just say for argument's sake, 400 grams. And then you get 400 grams of glycogen that's gone, and then 2.7 grams of it as well. So let's just say at least another 800 grams of water that goes. So that's 1.2 kilos that you're probably going to drop in that first week when you glycogen deplete.
Yeah, got you.
So people do these like keto or high fat diet, low carb diets, and they lose all that weight initially, but it's just like water weight and glycogen weight. So it's like artificial weight loss, but it sets you in this precedent that, yes, I've cut. It's working. So you're going to continue it. It gets really problematic when like you do what you do and you do fight sports where we walk in, which is like a sport that's highly glycolytic, which means you need carbohydrates to do the sport.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. So say, the stay-at-home mom that wants to lose weight, she's obviously going to have less carbohydrates because it's not performance-based as much as a professional athlete.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's the reason for the carbohydrates, right? It's highly based on your output and performance.
Yeah. Like you can survive without carbohydrates. That's why we have like a ketogenic system, right? Like in our body, like the metabolism, like if you want to get really into it, like there's this thing called like acetyl-CoA, and it's like the gatekeeper for all of our energy. And that thing has been like designed to produce this alternative energy system, which is our ketogenic energy system for times when we don't have carbohydrates. We can survive. That's fine.
Yeah.
In terms of performance, that's not fine.
No, yeah, totally. Well, I can attest to that because since 2016, I've had carbohydrates in my diet, which, wasn't when I started working with you, but it was definitely when I started working with a nutritionist for the first time. And, just from day-to-day performance, not just performance in the cage, but day-to-day performance was incredibly different. And I've had various different nutritionists, and I've eaten everywhere from, carbs before and after a workout to carbs in my 5 meals a day. And they've all kind of given me the result, right? So I've had some pretty big weight cuts. And, but, it's like for someone who's not trained, it's not trained in dietetics stuff. It's like, it's just a guessing game, right?
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important to reach out to someone to get them to help you. When you got a big goal, like if it's just eating healthy, just eat healthy. But if it's performance based, I think like one of the big misconceptions that I had was it's expensive. So when before 2016, you fight on the regional circuit and you're making $500 a fight, $1,000. Well, I wasn't, but most guys are making $500 to $1,000 a fight. So when you're making that $500 to $1,000 a fight, you're like, oh man, dietitian's going to cost me a fortune. It's not expensive. Do you know what I mean? And everyone seems to think that it's going to cost them an arm and a leg and they're going to make no money out of fighting. But at the end of the day, like you don't make money out of fighting on the regional circuit anyway. We all do it for the bigger goal. But it's really important for those guys, performance-wise, to do it. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a lot more guys doing it now. Like Diego's doing it. There's a lot of guys you work with on the coast and that aren't in the big shows. They're on the local shows and they're using nutritionists, and you can see it in their bodies. Massive difference. So we were sort of discussing before the show, but basically your massive, calorie deficit or whatever leading up, you're doing your weight cut, you get to fight week, reduce all your calories, and then you compete afterwards. You do whatever you do. Yeah, some of us drink whiskey, some of us eat sugar. Yeah, I've had some problems in the last couple of years, so I try to at least eat healthy for a couple of days till I get off the plane back at home. So we were talking about why guys, whether it's fluid or fat, they just like blow out. And I don't mean blow out like go like, okay, so I cut weight from 88 kilos to 70, roughly, generally. So I don't mean blow out to like, 95 kilos or whatever. I just mean like body composition wise, it's like swelling. It's like a weird bounce back, right? And we we're talking about earlier. For what reason would that happen?
Yeah, and it's super common, eh? Like the first two names that come to me is like you see this happen all the time where guys like start off at a weight class early on in their career, and then that effect that you're talking about just keeps happening, and then they have to go up like Dan Hooker, the featherweight, had to move up the lightweight, like Rob Whittaker going up weight or two like that come, and I guess now we have a bit better of an understanding about why, and this is a concept that was introduced to me by Dr. Carl Evans, who's like, I would say is one of the leading researchers in this field. And The way he describes it is kind of like a bank. And it's this effect called rebound hyperphagia, which essentially when you're in a fight camp and say you're cutting carbs or whatever, say you do this, like you're just cutting carbs and you're in a huge calorie deficit. Say you're doing that for 8 weeks. Say you're in a deficit, for argument's sake, what's an easy number to calculate? Like say 2,000 calorie deficit over 8 weeks. By the end of it, like that's 16,000 calories. Right? So, but like for a fighter, you know for a fact, it's a lot bigger of a deficit than that because you need to move that weight. You need to get it down. What the one piece of evidence that we have that Dr. Carl has put forward is that when he looked at this in a fighter, like keep in mind how difficult it is from what I said, measuring calories in and calories out. He did this every day for 8 weeks, following crazy. You reckon 6 hours a day on a spreadsheet. He found that fighter, by the time it came to weigh-ins, 105,000 calories in debt. So if you let that sink in, it's insane, right? So it's like, it makes sense almost just from that logic that after that weigh-in, your body is seeking calorie-dense foods. Now, the problem with that is that when you do that, and this is the effect that you're describing that you see a lot, when you just shove food down and you increase these calories, your body composition changes. And when your body composition changes, you put on more body fat, and then all of a sudden, you're starting at a higher weight, and then that next camp, you're starting slightly higher because even though you may have maintained that muscle mass, that body fat's gone up. So you're starting maybe half a kilo, the next one comes up. And that makes sense. And that's been shown in this study. It's like a groundbreaking study in nutrition science called the Minnesota Starvation Study by Ansel Keys. Can't do that stuff these days. Like this is like, they were investigating, studying prisoners of war and what it was like for prisoners of war when they go through like famine. So they had 3 groups, and they found that the group that had the highest calorie deficit, they experienced this thing called what was called rebound hyperphagia, where they eat to make up those lost calories, but their body composition changes. Whoever was in the greatest deficit put on the most fat when they came back to that weight, or they always came back higher and they had more fat. So you think about that, you do that over 3 fights a year, you do that over 3-4 years, there's no surprise that these guys, they get 4, 5, 6, 7 fights in their careers, their professional careers, where they're doing these big weight cuts, they're in these huge deficits. Why they have to go up? They physically can't get that weight down to reach that weight class anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that 100%. Like, but can you fix that? So say, when I started my professional career, I walk around at 78 to 80 kilos. Now I walk around at 85 to 88. I've had 36 fights. So over that 10 years or 9 years I've been fighting professionally, 36 fights, I've crept up slowly. I mean, lifestyle changes as well, jobs. I've worked a full-time job the whole time I've been competing. Is there a way, is it just a year-round thing to bring that weight back down to, not to necessarily to 80, because, when I started I was 25. I'm 35 now. So, as you get older, you tend to put a little weight on or whatever is like normal body composition.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Like we know as you get older, your metabolism slows.
Yeah.
So like if we're talking going back to that calories in, calories out equation, that resting metabolic rate or basal metabolic rate, that's a big part of it. And if that slows down, you're already fighting an uphill battle. Can you fix it? I guess theoretically, yeah, on paper you could. Does it happen?
It's going to affect your lifestyle, right?
Well, that's the thing.
Because then it becomes a year-round thing.
Yeah,
it's not like it's not a fight camp anymore. And I guess like when you're 25, everything is your whole year's a fight camp. That's all you care about.
Yeah, yeah.
When
theoretically,
have kids and I think business and all that sort of stuff, and life, is more important than. It's sort of like you still want to compete and you still want to do everything, but you've got other things going on. It's like the classic people trying to eat right while they're on the road. It gets hard, right?
Yeah,
it's not easy,
tough.
But it becomes a year-round thing to fix it, yeah.
Yeah, I think a good point to make on that is that, as you get older, there's all these things that happen, right? Like your metabolism literally slows. Like your metabolic rate slows. You think about the other parts of that calories out equation, like your physical output is probably not as high as what it once was. That NEAT, like all the stuff that you're doing in between the day, the gardening, the moving around, running around, that's probably gone down. So it's like you probably have to bring your calories down quite a lot. Something that's worth mentioning, and you see this in a lot with like active fighters, when they do these, like they completely cut carbohydrates, is what that happens on like a metabolic level, so to speak. Like we know for fighting that you use, like I said, that glycolytic pathway, that high carbohydrate pathway, but you also need fats. Like fats is what you use when you're recovering in between rounds. We call this thing like your RQ value, where we can go and like assess this, and it gives us an indication of how efficient your body is at using carbohydrates and using fats. Something that we find with people who abuse nutrition, say they don't eat carbs for a whole fight camp, they tend to not have that favorable RQ value where it's predominantly fat burning, and that can be problematic. And that becomes a question of, okay, say you come to me and I test you at the start of a fight camp, it's like, I don't know if you should do this fight camp. We'll probably have to spend a bit of time doing what we call metabolic rehab, where we have to move that number back down so you're more favorable at burning carbohydrates. Because, and people think like, well, do you need to do that? Probably not like guys like me who train recreationally, or like even guys like you, if like, depending what your goals are. But say if you're top 10 in the UFC, or you want to crack the UFC's top 15, absolutely. Because everyone else in that top 15 has that favorable number. And when it gets down to the thick of it, you get to the 5th round when you're gassed and you need that last like powerful recovery, that real glycolytic system. You need to put together 5, 6, 7, 8 punches to finish a fight. You need to sprawl to like shove a takedown. That takedown might be the difference on the judge's scorecard. It becomes important.
That's that Brad Riddell, Jamie Malarkey 3rd round stuff.
Yeah,
eh?
exactly.
You know, Dan Hooker,
exactly.
Paul Felder, round 5.
Man, I was actually thinking about that, and that comes into a whole nother discussion, which is for a different day. Is I think like Brad and Dan and that, whenever I see those guys go to like a 5th round, like I've worked with Brad in particular for a long time. It's like when that goes to that final round, one, like I know nutritionally he has that system that I know will take him through. Like we've gone to the UFCPI and we've done extensive testing with Brad. Like we work like tirelessly with Brad to get him, and he's like pretty much that peak athlete. And the way that like Eugene trains him and like what he puts them through, and like, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of like the Spider on a Sunday session. For those guys, it's like what they put them through, I think mentally. Like, I don't know if those guys are going to lose in that final round just from what they go through every week doing that. Like they've put themselves in the best spot nutritionally, skill-wise, they've done that their whole lives, and then they've got that extra level of that like mental. Which
well, I mean, I think any decent coach would do that. You know, like any coach that puts an athlete into a combat sports situation as far as competition goes and hasn't tested them in the gym, you know, it's like you got a liability to do that as a coach. I feel like as a coach, like you really, like you're essentially their dad as far as combat sports go. You know, you wouldn't want your son to grow up with the wrong values and do the wrong thing. You don't want your athletes to go into competition without the right assets. Do you know what I mean? And mental performance and mindset is part of that. And putting them in uncomfortable situations in the gym is what creates that character and that mental positivity, like positive sort of mindset. So I think that's really important. Eugene and the City Kickboxing guys clearly, as the world knows, has something special going on. And I've known those guys. I've been competing on the same cards in Asia for years with them, and man, it's so cool to watch them develop. But yeah, so bit of I seen Tyler Minton put something up the other day, and it kind of got me thinking. He put a post up saying, and I know it happens, so if I'll bring it up, people go vegan. They go, my body feels awesome. I never felt better. The pain's gone, blah, blah, blah. People go carnivore. I've never felt better. The pain's gone, blah, blah, blah. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. You go something and your body feels awesome. Now, I know people that have gone from like normal diet, clean, everything, gone to vegan. Man, my pain's gone in my joints. Everything feels awesome. I have a mate in Scotland, served in the army with him. He's carnivore. Full carnivore, disgusting. Man, eating like 3-month-old fermented meat. Yeah, you're hearing me, Jock. 3-month-old fermented meat. It's gross. He opens a jar and eats raw meat. But he's like, man, I've never felt better in my life. You know, all he does is eats meat, or like he eats freaking liver shakes. Yeah. Mixes them up with milk and eats liver shakes. It's gross, man. But why do people feel so awesome regardless of which one they do?
Yeah, like the short answer is because like you're not eating sugar, honey, iced tea, right? Like you cut all of that out of your diet. Like if you could do anything, like if you have a diet that's high in processed foods, refined sugars, you don't eat vegetables, you don't get high quality meat in your diet, then you go any which way about it. No matter what you do, you're going to feel better. Like because your standard, and this is something that I find a lot, I don't really work with that much Gen Pop, like the way we're taking the company now that it's kind of grown and we've got a base now, I can kind of start focusing on that a bit more. But people kind of generally accept that feeling crappy is just the norm. So when you start eating like fairly healthy and fairly good, it's like it's a big jump. And like no matter what you do, like vegan, carnivore, like I don't know, whatever, low carb, keto, whatever you do, like you're going to feel better because you've cut all the rubbish off. Like you've trimmed off all the sides and you've kept the substance, right? And there's like, to me, as a nutrition scientist and a professional, like I kind of look at food as numbers. And like when I look at like the human body, it's just like this big globally system of like electricity and sparks and chemical reactions. And like, you know that there's set rules of like thermodynamics and rules of physiology and rules of chemistry and biochemistry that work within that system. And so when you like start introducing all these weird concepts, like it's just noise, like that food all gets broken down into like the same basic building blocks. The vitamins and minerals, the micronutrients all have roles to play in this system. To me, it's just like as long as you're fulfilling that system's needs, no matter which way or what way you get it in, as long as those are being filled, you're going to feel good and that system's going to work well. The thing is that when you're eating like takeout 3-4 times a week or twice a day and eating crap, which, you know, we all go through phases where we do that, it's normal. It's like it takes a toll on that system. And like I said, like you find just a lot of people are used to just walking around feeling crappy with a subpar system.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So as soon as they cut all the side bits, they're going to feel good anyway.
Yeah, like, and the thing is, like, man, like carnivore is like, yeah, you're eating a lot of meat and protein and like there's so many ways you can go. But yeah, fat and like you're probably reaching your calories. But it's like, where are you getting like your vitamins and minerals from? Like this is like the same with the vegan argument. I have no problems with vegans. Like absolutely. Like I have vegan athletes who are animals, like who are beasts and serious beasts, and they do it really well. And then I've had one athlete in particular, or a couple by now, who have been vegan and it's nearly destroyed their career. Like it's nearly destroyed their career. So there's like a really good way to do it and there's a really bad way to do it. And
well,
it goes for all of them.
I always look at John Fitch. So he was vegan, pretty sure, or at least vegetarian, but I'm pretty sure he was vegan. And he's vegan his whole career. He's vegan as a wrestler. Man, top of the food chain, right? Competed against GSP, performed well, lean, did everything right. Obviously made it work for him. But yeah, most people who do one or the other or somewhere in between, they got to take extra vitamins and minerals and stuff. They're not getting it from food, right?
That's it, bro.
So there's a deficit there somewhere.
That's the thing is like if you're going to do vegan, you can absolutely be a top level athlete. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But in terms of that system, you still abide by the rules of that system. And like you're still that same hunk of flesh with all those chemical reactions going on.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, some things change and like epigenetics is a thing, but like you still abide by those rules. So say if you're eating vegan and you're not getting enough vitamin B12 or B6 or whatever, like you need to supplement with that. Like that's what a supplement's for. And you find like those guys that say like John Fitch, like they do that. They do that. They get all over it and it works for them, you know? Yeah. I think like human psychology is a big thing in nutrition that we don't talk about a lot. And it's because like it plays a huge role. Is like if you come to me and you say, I want to do vegan, and you're going to be able to stick to that and do that in a sustainable way and actually like create your lifestyle around it, I'm not going to like give you a lecture about all these things because that works for you, then power to you. Like as long as we're making this system work and everything, like all the boxes are ticked and you're healthy and like, you know, I'm making sure you're completely healthy, man, come to me and we'll do whatever. If that what works for your lifestyle, do it. Like you mentally, I think people need to own something and like by human nature, like we're territorial things. So it's like if you swap over and you do carnivore and that works for you, like you love owning that. Like that becomes a part of your personality, right? Like food is so intertwined with our lifestyle, with our makeup. Like food is like our body, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that becomes a part of you, becomes a part of your personality. And like, I have no problem with that. Like it's an expression of you as long as that system is all in place.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So the Fight Dietitian, how did that start?
Ooh. See, this is interesting. So as the team's built up, I've kind of brushed this story, but I've never really talked about it openly. But you know what? I think we'll go over it. And like, I don't not talk about it only because I don't want to talk negatively about someone or someone's association or an organization without them having the chance to talk. But like,
100%.
I think like, let's go over it because like, I don't think there's anything negative to say, but when I started this thing, like when I graduated uni, like we'll go through it pretty quick. I graduated uni and I wanted to do combat sports. I've always loved combat sports. Do you remember that show where, what was the two dudes? Jimmy Smith used to do it and they used to travel around the world and they used to try all the combat sports.
Yeah.
Man, I love that. I watched that like 100 times when I was like in high school. Always liked it. Boxed when I was younger, but like there's no jobs. You finish university, you Google combat sports dietitian, nothing comes up. So I was like, and the thing is like for a long time, I wanted to be a doctor. And like that was my focus. I didn't really like dietetics. I thought it was a subpar science. And like I focused all my time in it. That's why I'm so like, when people talk to me, I'm really into like this biochemistry, metabolism and endocrinology. And because like I thought I was going to be a doctor for like a long time. I just, for whatever reason, I couldn't get past that med school exam. And so when I finished university, I ended up going to Canada. And when I was in Canada, like, I don't know if anyone's lived in Canada, the pay is not too good. Like you take a big pay cut. So I was doing all sorts of weird stuff to like feed myself. So I was running like boxing classes. And the thing is like when you naturally do that, people find out you've got nutrition and that just kind of naturally rolls. So that's where the whole idea of the Fight Dietitian came. The thing is that I've always been really influenced by like guys like Clint Wattenberg, who wrote like Nutrition for Wrestlers, was a big book that I wrote. Dr. Reed Reel at the time was doing his PhD at the Australian Institute of Sport, doing the first study in like water loading. So I was really following him. Guys like Dr. James Morton, Dr. Carl Langan-Evans wrote pretty much the handbook, like how to make weight in combat sports in 2011. The thing is with all that research, there's not a lot of practical advice that comes in it. So I was this guy that I was over in Canada working in these, like not working, but like training these MMA gyms and like trying to do this extra work and figure this out. And there wasn't that practical experience. So I like went searching. And at the time, that's when Connor was the man. And like, as you know, like the team that Connor worked with was like George Lockhart and that. Yeah. And man, and like people say a lot of things about George and like everyone has a lot of like different opinions, like, and there's a big consensus in the academic community. Personally, I have no problem with George. I think he's a great guy. I think he's like infectious with like how he is. Like if you've ever met him, like,
super positive.
Man, like he's a really cool guy. I think no matter what your opinion is on George, if he's done good things for this sport, if he's done bad things or how he practices, if he's right or if he's wrong, one thing you cannot argue is the spotlight that he put on these problems. Yeah. Is that by what George did and whether you agree with how George went about it, he put a big spotlight on there. And I know for a fact that there's academics out there that did a PhD based on what he did, and they wanted to show that what he was doing may not have been the best way. And now the sport is better off for it because people like me have these studies and these PhDs that I can, like these PhD people that I can go, hey, you know, actually weight cutting in the bath, when I was working with George, we did it this way. And they'd be like, oh man, like we've ran these studies. That's actually not what happens. And like now we've got studies about water loading and we know like what we used to think how it happened, that's not how it happens. It works like this. And the way we go about a fight week is like, you know, you do this with the carbs and you don't have to be as aggressive with your carbohydrate depletion, and maybe the sodium, you don't have to cut down as much. Back, I guess, when he started, he probably didn't have all that, but he was kind of making do. And that's where I got to start. I ended up doing a certification with George in LA. And like, to be honest, like I had a master's degree, and I think it was more tailored for people who didn't really do anything with nutrition. So it's like I kind of didn't get a lot out of that, but what I was really into was like him with the weight cutting and doing all that. And it was the first time I'd ever seen like someone doing it practically. And at the time he was working with Connor and doing all these things. And in MMA, there's this presense that a lot of people fall victim to, is that elite fighters have elite teams around them, which you'd know like isn't always the case. Like, so just because Conor McGregor was the best in the world doesn't necessarily mean he has the best team in the world. And that's not taking anything away from like George or whatever, like, but what we know now and compared to what we know then, it's chalk and cheese, like we know. So that's kind of, I started and I did that certification and I really liked it. I liked the hands-on side of it. I didn't necessarily agree with a lot that they were doing in ways, and we eventually clashed heads a lot, but I ended up doing like a couple fight cards with them. And like your training partner, Ben 10, I worked with him independently and he took me to like Adelaide, and that's where I met Tyson Pedro, and it was through like working with George, and then like that's how I met like a lot of these UFC guys. And then like I actually ended up meeting Kai, because one of George's guys was actually working with Kai and his opponent, which is like, I don't know if it's like an American thing.
That's
but
that's happened to me.
Right.
Like when I fought Frank Camacho, he was working with Camacho. I think he was working with Vince Pichel maybe as well.
Yeah.
I think he worked with Cruikshank when I fought Cruikshank on Rise. And like he's worked with me and other guys. I wasn't working with him with the Cruikshank fight, but like he's worked with a lot of my opponents.
Yeah. Yeah. And like no matter what, like I think for me personally, I grew up playing rugby. I'm very much, I think it's very much like an Aussie Kiwi thing, like an Anzac thing, is like I would never do that. Like I would never do that for like my professional guys. Like, so it's like,
I think like, well, I was always told, you know, and it's always like, hey, listen, I'm doing this. How do you feel about that? You know, and I think if you pay the price, you pay for exclusivity. You know, he's not working with Connor's opponents. Can assure you of that.
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Well, I would be certain that he's not anyway. Like Connor's paying for that price. You know what I mean? Maybe his guys are, but he's not.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's like, but yeah, I get what you're saying. So like he sort of came along and drew the spotlight to the sport from a nutrition focus and a weight cutting focus when that study wasn't around.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and then people studied what he was doing and came up with better ways.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of work, like Carl and James' work came out in like 2011, which we kind of would call the gold standard, and I think George was just very innovative with. I think he just took something that no one was really doing, and he kind of owned that field. And like I said, you can say what you want about it. Like, I don't really want to comment my thoughts about it, but it's like, but you know, like a lot of people think one thing or think another. Like I say, like you can't argue what he did is that he put a big spotlight on it, and like he's not so much around these days, and for whatever reason, because I think like the UFC and Clint Wattenberg, like with their team, like Chef Mario and Charles
they got their own nutritionist team now to work with the athletes, and athletes get it for free.
Yeah, and they offer the service, right? So it's like, and I would argue that all of that has come because of that, you know? So it's like, whether you think he's done it, like, I don't necessarily agree. Like I said, we butt head on a lot of things, and there was a lot of things I didn't agree with that he did, but you cannot argue that he put a spotlight on that and has made the sport. And now I'm in the fortunate position where like there are a lot of people and a lot of resources I can draw on because of that. Like, don't get me wrong, there were probably like a lot of ducks that got shot along the way that no one knows about, but like it is a better sport for it, you know?
Yeah, look, I mean, I worked with him, you know. I went 10 days out from Atlanta from 201 and walked in at 74 kilos for a 70 kilo fight. It was insane. Like, I was losing so much. I was younger, but I was losing so much weight. I was eating a packet of dates after every workout just to kind of like eat more food, you know what I mean? But, you know, it is what it is. But it worked for me because probably comes back to that vegan carnivore thing, right? I cut like a diet. I went straight onto this like clean eating meal plan and it just cut all the shit. And so that's why it works so well for me as well. But super nice guy. I met him when I was over there. He did my fight week that week, and really nice guy. Nothing bad to say about him. But that's how you got started. So that's how the Fight Dietitian came about. I guess you would have went through a period where everyone thought the Fight Dietitian was about fighting and combat sports, but you do, you know, like have normal clients, right?
Yeah. I guess like I have like 3 key things. And I guess like when I started the Fight Dietitian, there was 3 core like pillars that I wanted myself and everyone that works for me in the company to like uphold. And the first one was to use like an evidence-based scientific practice with our combat sport athletes, because I'd seen at the highest level how that was not occurring. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to make the potentially dangerous practices such as weight cutting, I wanted to raise awareness and mitigate those risks. That was number 2. And number 3, which the company's always maintained, is that we just promote the benefits of good nutrition and physical activity. And as part of that, we do take on like quite a bit of Gen Pop, and we do that because it's there's a lot more people who aren't fighters than who are fighters, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like and if you want to really have a lot of reach, and I think you learn a lot from working with fighters and doing this kind of extreme that is relevant for people in the everyday life, you know, like how to diet, like mentally, like the physical and mental side of it, like the mental side of it, of how you guys stay disciplined. I've taken a lot out of and use that with my Gen Pop clients, like to keep them motivated and things like that. So yeah, we do quite a lot of Gen Pop. We're going into like a lot more of an education type style now. Like we're planning a lot of seminars where we go around and we, you know, do education. We're bringing out like a lot of resources. We want to push a lot of free resources into like the combat community, because jiu-jitsu is kind of like, especially jiu-jitsu is kind of turning into like old school karate. Remember when all the kids and families would like to, and like, of
course,
if you've got the kid in jiu-jitsu, there's probably like the mum and the dad and the brother, you know, so they can all benefit.
My gym, I got families in my gym. Yeah, I got 2 kids in a kids class, and I got the dad in my jiu-jitsu classes, and mum comes to the ladies only classes, which we have twice a week. So it's really becoming like that modern day kind of karate, taekwondo sport is jiu-jitsu now. And the tournaments of like, you know, jiu-jitsu tournaments are like, I kind of hate saying it, but at the same time they're watered down.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like the rule sets are watered down to suit children competing. They're watered down, like, you know, not pulling on the head in a triangle. Like, come on guys, your ass is getting choked anyway. Like, you know, and the vertebrae is moving on the, you know, your spine's moving on the axis it's meant to, like things like that. Like, but it's watered down for that reason. Yeah. Right. More people want to do it because it's safer. I obviously do combat sports to the extreme. So for me, I'm like, shit. But for the everyday person, they want to go back to work on Monday. Do you know what I mean? So competing on Sunday is not about getting black eyes and stitches. It's about having fun, doing something. And most of them can do that as a family. And definitely down at Base Training Center, they can do that as a family. So, you know, we train with safety as much as possible at the forefront. So, but man, we talked about heaps today. Yeah. It was awesome. We crushed it. We're almost 3/4 of an hour in. I like to keep the podcast at a length that people can listen while they drive to work. So we'll wrap it up for today, but we'll definitely get you back on, man, because I love nutrition and I love talking about it, and I like sugar as well. But where can people find you? Mainly on Instagram, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'll be happy to come back on. I actually just got Twitter as well.
Yeah, we noticed that.
Yeah, man. I
popping up there every now.
No idea how to use Twitter. It's the Twitterverse is
man, hit up Israel Adesanya. Yeah, he's all over that Twitter stuff. That's for sure.
He loves it. Hey, but on Twitter, it's Twitter is at Fight Dietitian. The Fight Dietitian was taken, but on Instagram is where I'm probably most active. We're _Fight Dietitian. And then on Facebook, The Fight Dietitian, or you can go to the website www.thefightdietitian.com.
There we have it. Thanks for joining us on the wireless today, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the fans will appreciate the knowledge.
No, of course. Thanks for having us on Beatdown anytime.
No worries, man. Have a good one, hey?
You too.